This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Connected Data, the makers of Transporter and the brand new Transporter Sync. Find out more and get 10% off the new Transporter Sync with the offer code MV10 at filetransporter.com/MV. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is the talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner, and folks, this is another one of our first weekend with shows, this time with the iPad Retina. The only trouble is that, first of all, I didn't get an iPad Mini Retina, because I just got an iPad Air, and I find that better for my purposes. What's really been interesting is that it's been sort of tough to recruit jurors who got an iPad Mini with Retina, because so many people either haven't done it yet, had trouble getting one, or have just opted to stay with the Air. But I did find two lonely souls who, ponied up the money and are here to talk about it. So let's find out who. First up, we haven't seen her for a while, Miss Katie Floyd. Katie, it's great to have you back.
Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, after seeing or hearing your story about going to get one, I thought it was definitely one to get you on here.
Yeah.
For the folks who don't know you, where can we find you when you're not here serving on the MacJury?
Well, you can find my blog over at katiefloyd.me, KATIEFLOYD.me, and it's got links to everything that I do. And my podcast is Mac Power Users over on 5x5 that I do weekly with David Sparks.
Yeah, that Sparks guy, yeah.
Just some guy on the website.
Yeah. And of course, our other guest, who also has taken a different approach to getting an iPad Mini with Retina, Mr. Ted Landau. Ted, it's great to talk to you.
Yeah, good to be back, as always.
Yeah. So,
and good to be able to say hi to Katie as well. So
you too, Ted.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Have you two ever been served together here on the MacJury?
Served on the jury. Whoa, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we've ever served together.
Okay. Well, now you can say you served together.
Yeah, that's right.
There we go.
So, guys, as I said, it was really interesting. I was sending DMs to people. We did have one other person who had to bow out at the last minute, but I was trying to find some other people that have gotten Mac Minis with Retinas, and it's kind of surprising, and of course there was this stealth launch. There were so many things here going. But Katie, I want to start with your story as to the extreme measures you took to get your Mini.
Well, there were rumors coming out, I guess Monday night late, saying that the Minis were going to soft launch on Tuesday, and I discounted them a little bit, and I kind of forgot about them a little bit. And I got up and I started my morning on Tuesday, and I thought, oh my gosh, there were the rumors that the Mini was going to launch. So I raced over to my computer and checked apple.com, and sure enough, the Minis had launched. And by that time, it was about 6:30, 7 o'clock Eastern, and they were showing about 1 to 3 day ship times on a couple of models of the Wi-Fi, and the pretty much everything else, and all the LTE models were showing 5 to 10. So I ordered one on apple.com. I ordered a 32 gig black model, 5 to 10 day shipping, put it here sometime either the week of Thanksgiving or the week after, depending on where it fell in that range. And took a little bit of solace in hearing that it was pretty much 5 to 10 day ship times no matter when you ordered it. So I figured I wasn't too far back in the queue. And then we started getting reports that a couple of people were having luck if they did the reservation system. So I signed up for one of the websites that popped up telling you that they would let you know when an iPad Mini was available. You would pop in the desired model that you wanted, and they would email you. And I was actually out and about at Starbucks and got an email from this website saying, hey, your iPad Mini is available. And I immediately called apple.com and said, look, here's the deal. I want this iPad Mini, but I only want to cancel my other order if you can guarantee me that ordering this one is actually a confirmed order. And they did, and ordered one, canceled the other, and the next day drove to an Apple store about 60 miles away and picked it up.
So you really wanted this iPad Mini.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, I took an afternoon off work. It was kind of a slow day, and just kind of made an afternoon of it.
Good. Ted, you took a little bit different approach, I believe, to getting your Mini.
Yes. So there's some similarities with what happened to Katie. I had been debating for the longest time whether I was going to get an iPad Air or an iPad Mini, and I went to the stores. I looked at them. I couldn't see the Retina iPad Minis, but I could imagine how they would look, and I kept being indecisive as to which one I would actually want. I was leaning towards the iPad Air because I tend to like the bigger screen. That's more important to me. I don't do much traveling, and so basically the iPad would be used at home mostly. And I thought at home I didn't have to worry about how portable it was, and having a larger screen would be nice. And of course the iPad Air was much closer to the iPad Mini in weight anyway, so I didn't think I'd be sacrificing much. But I still was attracted to the Mini. I wanted to give it a try, and ultimately, I have an iPad 2. Actually, I have an iPad 1, 2, and 3 at home that I've never sold. And the iPad 1 I was going to hang on to, but I figured iPad 2, iPad 3. I said if I sold them at anywhere near a decent price, I could cover the cost of an iPad Mini. And so I said, all right, I'm going to get both and just have fun. So I decided to get an iPad Air and Mini and have fun deciding which one I like better. I went online, ordered them both. I actually was up at night when the rumors about the iPad Mini going on sale were true. Were confirmed and turned out to be true. So I ordered them both, and then the next day I went to bed. And the next day, and again it was like Katie, a 5 to 10 day wait. And then the next day, I decided I had wound up ordering the cellular Verizon cellular on the Mini and just Wi-Fi on the Air. I didn't think I needed cellular on both. And then I woke up in the next day, and for reasons that aren't really worth going into, I decided that was a mistake. I should have done it the reverse way, gotten the Wi-Fi on the Mini and the cellular on the Air. So I went and I canceled my order, which it still hadn't been too late to cancel. I had no trouble doing that. I saw it was still 5 to 10 days to order it again, so I said, okay. And I went to order it again, and when I ordered the Air, when I went to order the Mini, it said that there was one exactly how I wanted available at my local Apple store for pickup. So I said, oh, okay, whatever. That was a surprise. And so I said that's what I wanted to do and reordered both that way, drove to the Apple store, picked it up, no hassle, and I had an iPad Air later that day.
That's great. Listen, on behalf of Apple shareholders everywhere, I want to thank you for the philosophy of we'll just buy both.
Buy both
and figure it out later. Yeah.
If you can't make up your mind, get them both.
Katie, why the Mini? And especially given all the reports we've seen of the Air, and of course I've had an Air in my hand, and I'm sure you have too. What was it about the Mini that made you swing in that direction?
I have not had an Air in my hand, and that's funny. I should have. I should have checked out the Air when I went to the Apple store to pick out my Mini, but I was so hyper-focused on getting my Mini, I think I just blew right by it. I don't have any idea of whether they were even available in the store to look at. I'm sure they were. But to answer your question, I talked a little bit about this with Adam Christensen on one of the shows that he did when the iPad Air came out. And, I've been an iPad owner since day one, and love my iPad, but I was finding that my iPad primarily lived on my bedroom side table or on my living room table, and it would go back and forth between the two. And don't get me wrong, I loved my iPad, and I used it all the time. It was the first thing I touched when I got up in the morning and the last thing I put down at night. But I was finding that I wasn't using it as much as I thought I could or I should, and that it was being primarily a consumption device for me, even more so than the iPhone, which I was using so much more just because it was the device that I had with me all the time. And for me, I really felt that portability was key. The full-size iPad was a little too big and a little too heavy, especially with the case that I had on it, to throw in my purse and take somewhere. Now, obviously, if I had a special reason to take it, I would. But just carrying it around day to day was not something that I did. And I've always regretted not buying the original iPad Mini. At that time, I decided against it because I saw it as a downgrade because of the internals of an iPad 2. And at this point in time, with the iPad Mini being equal, more or less, for all practical purposes, equal in terms of horsepower to the iPad Air, for me, I thought the size, having a smaller size was such a benefit, and that I would actually take it and use it and have it available to me more often. Why not go with the Mini? And more so, if I didn't, I would just always regret it, having never done it. So that's why I went with the Mini.
And Ted, I know you and I have talked about it a little bit. We talked before you went and got both of them, why you were kind of back and forth. And it sounds like all those arguments still hold, that you just couldn't make up your mind, and so you decided to test both out and see which works for you better.
Pretty much. When I went to the store, to some extent, I think it's a matter of what you get used to. When I went to the store and looked at the minis for the first time, carefully, I had seen them before over the past year, but just looking now to see if I was going to buy one, everything looked too small to me. The icons on the home pages were a little too small. I even had a little trouble at my age reading the names of the apps, and when I opened apps to look at newspaper apps and stuff like that, it just layouts in Safari. This is all too small, and I'm just not going to lie. It's just not worth it to me. But still, I appreciated the portability, the size, and like I said, so I give it a try. Now I've had the iPad Mini for about a week, and I'm still waiting for my iPad Air to arrive. It's in Korea somewhere, according to the tracking system. It's just languishing there. It's been in China or Korea for almost a week now. I don't know. It must be on some very slow mode of transportation.
Stuck in customs.
That's right. In any case, now that I've gotten used to the iPad Mini, it doesn't seem so tiny anymore. And now when I shift to the iPad 3, which I still have and occasionally use while I'm getting ready to sell it, it seems almost annoyingly large. And so I just decided, you can pretty much get used to either one. And I still feel like I don't need the smaller size for traveling around, like Katie is saying. I basically use my iPhone when I'm out of the house. The only time I really need an iPad when I'm out of the house is if I'm going to plop down somewhere for a period of time, like if I'm going on a trip or visiting somebody or something like that, and I want to have something other than my iPhone with me. But for just getting around, I use the iPhone, and so I think if I had to pick, if someone said you can only pick one, you don't have the luxury of getting both, I'd probably go with the iPad Air at this point, even though I haven't gotten it yet, to be sure. But that's my guess. But on the other hand, I'm enjoying the iPad Mini much more than I thought, and now that I've gotten used to it, it doesn't seem nearly as small.
Well, I'll tell you, I had a perfect example today. My iPad Mini is, and I didn't test it beforehand, but I picked up the Apple Smart cover for the smart case, the one that goes all the way around, as my case for it, and it just fits in my purse. And I have a fairly small purse, and I threw it in my purse. First time I've done it without a specific intention on the way to work today, just because, and not even thinking that at 3:00 this afternoon I had a meeting out of the office with the vendor who was giving a proposal for some telephone and other systems that they wanted to install in our office. And as I was getting ready at 2:30 to leave for my meeting, I went just kind of instinctively to the supply closet to go grab a yellow pad and some pens to take with me out the door to my meeting. And I stopped and I thought, why am I doing this? I've got my iPad in my purse. And I just grabbed my purse and walked out the door. And sure enough, at the vendor meeting, I, plopped open my iPad and popped open Evernote, which is where I keep those types of notes for the office, and, took notes of our meeting and closed it up and walked out the door, and we were done. And that's exactly what I want to be able to do with my iPad, and something I would not have done last week with my third generation iPad, and something I was able to do today because I had the Air and because I'd thrown it in my purse this morning.
Well, I don't have a purse to throw it into, so
we can get you one.
Okay. Well, it's not as much of an issue for me, but yeah, I absolutely see your point.
Yeah, it doesn't fit in my purse either. I went with the Air because it's just not practical for me to try to type on a Mini. And I don't have large hands, but when I tried, and I did have a Mini for a while, the first gen, and sold it just because it was a great little consumption device, but I would always reach for just the regular size iPad. So that was sort of my thinking. But what I've been really interested in, I have not had my hands on a new Mini, but I did with the old Mini, is that the system configurations, the power, the chipsets, and even the weight now have so much parity that it's really kind of comes down to just the screen size. And so there was a time, Katie, I think you're the one that said that you viewed it as sort of a downgrade, and I think we all did. But now that there's parity in that stuff, really you can make a choice just based on size and not feel like you're a second-class citizen.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And that was the big thing, is I didn't want people to say, "Oh, your iPad is just a mini." Well, the reality is I don't use my iPad for anything that even realistically having a first generation mini would be fine for me horsepower wise. I'm not really. What am I doing with my iPad? I'm taking notes. I'm writing blog posts. I'm doing things like that. Any iPad would be just fine for me. I'm not doing gaming or anything like that. But I tell you, the Retina display on this is gorgeous. I have read more in the past couple of days than I have in the last month, just because it makes me want to read on this iPad mini.
Yeah, there's no doubt the Retina display is fantastic on both the Air and the Mini. And I was looking at the old Mini when I was in the stores because the Retina ones hadn't been on display yet. And maybe I'm just more sensitive to it than some, but just a glance at it, and it was inferior that I could notice. You could just see all the pixelation on the text that you don't on the Mini. It looks like you're actually looking at printed text that somebody ran off on a high-end printer system as opposed to a digital look. And so it really is tremendously different. It does make reading a lot easier, no doubt about it.
And for me, for reading, it's not just the display, although that is huge, but it's the display combined with the weight. The Mini is just it truly is a single-handed device that you grab and you start reading whenever. And the other iPad, the iPad 3 that I had with my case, I would find that I would want to prop it up against something when I was reading, or it was definitely kind of a two-handed device. And the Mini, it's almost like paperback.
Well, that's where it might have paid for you to look at the Air, because the Air is so much closer in weight to the Mini than the iPad 3 was, that you might have found that the weight difference wasn't as much of an issue.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it was quite surprising to compare my iPad 3 with the new iPad Air. You couldn't believe that they were able to shave off that much weight.
Yeah, even my wife, who isn't that sensitive to these things, when we went to the Apple store together, I said, "Here, pick up this iPad Air and see what it feels like." And she picked it up and said, "Whoa, that's light!" It feels like it's almost nothing. Yeah. And in some sense, I think that Jason Snell, I forget who it was, he might have said this in one of his articles, that it feels lighter than the iPad Mini because it's bigger. You sort of expect a heavier weight with something that big, and so the sort of visual expectation of what you expect by something that big and the actual weight being so low, it actually makes it seem like it's weightless almost.
Katie, I'm not sure you said, Ted did, but what did you get? Did you get just Wi-Fi, or did you get a cellular connection?
No, I got cellular connection, and actually this weekend I connected it to my Verizon account. I have a family share, even though it's just me, one of their share everything plans, which is the only plan that you can get now. And so for $10 a month, I was able to connect it to that account and use my shared pool of data. So I went ahead and did that.
Good deal. Yeah.
And I went back and forth of whether I would do that or whether I would just do the pay-as-you-go data. And I figured at least for the first little while, I was going to do the go ahead and take it out of my data plan, shared data, just because this is a device that I want to take with me. And there was always a hesitation with my other iPad, which was also LTE enabled, about, it's not quite worth $25 for this one time that I'll use it, or $20 or whatever it was. And now there's no hesitation. It's there.
That's good. I find that the speed difference, both with the iPhone 5S and the iPad Mini now, it's subtle, but it does make a difference to me. And with a nice LTE connection as well, there's a sense I have now where I'm not bothering with the intricacies of a device anymore. It's almost like it just sort of flows. I want to do something, I take the iPhone out of my pocket, or I take the iPad Mini off the desk and tap something, and it's done. The hassles of trying to deal with the technology, wait for something that isn't quite efficient, wait for something to load, and get frustrated that this isn't going as smoothly as you would like, are largely gone. You can just focus on the tasks and not worry about whatever it is that's powering the machine as much anymore.
And I hate to comment too much on that because I'm not a Mini owner, but yeah, Ted, that's the way I feel about the Air. It's just that much faster. It's not like, oh my God, faster, but it's just faster enough that it makes me really appreciate it. And and be happy that I went ahead and upgraded.
Yeah. They're both tremendous upgrades this year. Not in terms of spectacular new features, but the difference in weight and speed and size. The iPad Air, of course, is smaller than the older iPad main size as well. So the iPad Air and Mini, it's really tough to decide. So I got two, one of each.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Transporter by Connected Data. Your data in your own private cloud. Safe, secure, and cost-effective. Visit filetransporter.com/MV to get yours. Once upon a time, you were limited to 2 terabytes of data on your transporter. But that was once upon a time. This is now, and with the new Transporter Sync from Connected Data, you can connect any drive up to 4 terabytes and put all that storage in the cloud. But not just any cloud, your own cloud. Your own private cloud. Your own private cloud sitting on your desk in your home or office and nowhere else. Not on someone else's server in some data farm in some unknown location. Your data is only accessible by you unless you choose to share or sync that data. And if you do, it is super simple to make that sync or share happen. To another transporter, to another computer, or to a friend. But you only share or sync what you want, not everything in a folder or directory. You have control. And it's all about control when it comes to your data. What about the iPhone or iPad? What about them? Connected Data has a great iOS app that was recently updated and gives you access to all of your information wherever you are, on whatever device, so you're never far from your data. Or your data is never far from you. Depends on your perspective. Whether you're going with the original transporter in any of its storage configurations, or the new Transporter Sync and bring your own drive, you can get all of this at a price that can't be beat by any of the online services. And for a limited time, you get 10% off a new Transporter Sync by using the code MV10 at filetransporter.com/MV. That's 10% off the new Transporter Sync with the code MV10 at filetransporter.com/MV. Transporter. Your data in your own private cloud. Safe, secure, and cost-effective. Thanks to Transporter for sponsoring this edition of Mac Voices. Well, question for you both, and Katie, you may be the one to answer this as far as the Mini. Is the new Mini exactly the same size as the old Mini?
I have no idea. I never had an old Mini.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm sorry.
No, but I can tell you spec-wise that it is, because I did buy. I went through quite a few cases before I finally settled on the one that I went with. But I bought a few cases that were specifically designed for the old Mini, and they all fit, with the exception that I believe this one is a millimeter or so thicker, the new Mini.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. Speaking of the case, Katie, I went with an iPad cover. And partly aesthetically, because I like the idea of showing off and being able to see how nicely designed the back of the iPad is without covering it up. And also, I was a little bit worried about whether it was just add so much bulk and weight to the iPad that it would begin to defeat the purpose of having gotten something that thin and light to begin with. So I'd be curious if you did any comparison of the case versus the cover.
I did. I went through quite a process. I initially, when I ordered my iPad, the one that I ultimately canceled, I ordered just the cover, and the cover actually shipped and arrived well before the iPad did. I ultimately canceled the iPad. And I started thinking about it, and I really wanted back protection for the iPad, because I got the space gray model, and I'd seen with the iPhone 5s, I haven't seen so much with the 5Ss yet because they're so new, that the black model of the iPhone 5s were particularly prone to scraping and scuffing in the back. And I thought, if this is something that I really want to take with me everywhere and something that I'm going to throw in my purse with my keys and whatever else may be in there, I probably want some back protection. So initially I got a cover and one of those clear black or ultra thin black clear snap-on cases, like a shield for the back. And there are a couple of minute differences between the old iPad and the new iPad mini. Specifically, the new one has a microphone on the back. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a case that's specifically for the iPad mini, it doesn't have that microphone cut out. So you might want to be aware of that. I just wasn't sure what the problems would be if you cover up that microphone cutout. I don't know that it'd be any great detriment, but you might have some issues with voice recognition or something like that. And then I saw a couple of very high resolution photos and some reviews of the smart case. And man, it looked good. I mean, it looked like a very classy case. And so when I ordered my second iPad, I ordered the smart case and picked that up at the Apple store. And I don't know how good the video is, but it's right here. And it is super sleek. It is very thin. It adds minimal weight and thickness to the iPad. Of course, it has the smart features where it will flip back on itself. It's got a nice little Apple logo on the back, and I like it because it just feels. Of course, it's $70, so it's more than I thought that I would spend on a case for the iPad, but such is the case. And it just has a really nice high quality feel to it, and I've been pretty happy with that. My only complaint is I think the same complaint that most people have about the Apple case and cover is that the new trifold design that they have when they move to the smaller form factor doesn't quite seem as sturdy as the fourfold design they used to have.
I find it doesn't hold up the iPad in landscape mode quite as high as I would like either.
Yeah. And I have to double check and make sure that, okay, is it clipped together and is it sturdy before I set it down.
I will add, I have heard that the scratching and scuffing that you reported for the black iPad or the previous generation case, the previous generation back, isn't as much of an issue, if it is at all, for the space gray. I think people have speculated that part of the reason they went to the space gray is to put an end to those sort of issues. But
yeah,
still,
I've heard that too.
Yeah, if you're going to put it in your purse, it's probably good to have the back cover.
Right. And maybe in 2 years I won't need it. After we've seen this for 2 years and seen how well it wears, I'll decide, okay, I'll take the cover. Next one I won't get the case for.
So this may seem like a redundant question, but I'm really intrigued how you both use your iPads. And the reason I ask, because it does affect case design. Because so often I use my iPad. This is my Zugu case, and I use it in this propped up portrait, landscape mode. And unfortunately, that seems to be something that a very, very few cases can do, and do properly. And I don't think, unfortunately, the Apple case is one. So is it a case where you two never prop your iPad up like that, maybe to watch a video or to look at Flipboard or Twitter or something as you're doing something else? Are you always having it flat down, or are you always holding it? Katie?
So tell me, like you've got it like resting on your lap in landscape mode?
No, I mean, I will put it in front of me almost like another monitor in some situations. There, maybe that'll show it a little bit better.
But, well, yeah, my case does that.
Yeah, but does it hold it that much up?
No.
Probably. No, probably not up as much as yours does, but it's certainly. I'm trying to do it here with one hand, but it's certainly fine for TV watching or TV watching, for iPad watching. This is my TV now. Yes. It's certainly, if you have it sitting on a table in front of you, it's certainly fine for watching videos and things like that. But I find that's a huge difference between the iPad mini and the full-size iPad, is I use my full-size iPad almost exclusively in landscape mode. And unless I'm watching a video, the mini I almost always, and the mini I almost always have in portrait mode.
Interesting. Ted?
I use them both in landscape mode most of the time. And I was just going to show, here's the case, and it would be nice if the iPad could support being on the case in landscape mode that way, but it doesn't. It actually slips down, and so you can't see it very well here. But if you put this down on a table, it would be much lower than the thing that you were showing with your case.
Yes.
But I actually don't use it that way all that much. I'm happy to have it be flat on the table or holding it or whatever. I'm just using it. It's just part of my routine of the day. Again, if I was to be using something really for work, if I wanted my iPad as much as possible to be a substitute for a MacBook Pro, I'd almost not even almost, I'd say for sure, I'd want that larger one for sure. I wouldn't want to try to simulate working at a MacBook Pro sort of level on an iPad mini. And I wouldn't recommend that for anybody. But for the sort of just around the house sort of thing, anytime I need to search the web for something, maybe Naomi says, can you look up what the weather's going to be later even, or how much this costs on Amazon, or anytime I want to check the news or anything, or just play a game or to take a break, I just grab the iPad and I do it, and it's something that I'm just doing constantly throughout the day, and it's convenient to have the smaller one in that sense.
Did the camera make any difference to either one of you?
No.
No, none.
Okay.
I don't use the iPhone camera is so far superior that I think it's silly to even consider using the iPad. Not to mention that the iPad Air or iPad 3 still looks ridiculously silly to me when I see somebody taking pictures with it. So,
But you see them. I don't know that I've ever used the iPad camera other than when I wanted to intentionally use the iPad camera to test it or say, oh, look, I'm using the iPad's camera.
Okay.
Maybe to FaceTime or something, I guess. But if I'm ever going to FaceTime with the iPad, I think I'd probably just come into my Mac and do it.
Yeah, FaceTime is okay, but to take pictures of it, I would never use the iPad camera for taking pictures.
No.
Sounds like I've tapped a nerve there on both of you. It's like, no, I don't want to be one of those people that
You don't want to be one of those people.
I don't get it, Katie. And not that I do that much, if any, but I guess I'm just surprised at the vehemence with which this gets people's goat. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me because you've got this huge, beautiful viewfinder, whether it's a mini or an Air, right there in front of you. And why wouldn't you want to?
Hang on, Chuck. I can't hear you. I'm not paying attention. I'm trying to take a photo with my iPad.
I'm not gonna win this argument. I just don't. It doesn't offend me. I mean, now in certain situations, if people are blocking the view of people behind them, that's another matter. But if it's just someone out, doing touristy things, why not?
Yeah. If having such a large viewfinder was so wonderful, then Canon and Nikon would be making little pocket cameras that open up to have that larger display or something. I mean, I'm being facetious, obviously, but nobody wants that large a video display for a camera. It's just you're making the best of it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep, I'm not going to get anywhere with this. Okay. Yeah. Well, how about just overall experience now that you've both had a little bit of time to play with this? Are you happy? And I know, Ted, you don't have your Air in hand yet, but are you happy with it? Any regrets? Any thinking, gee, maybe I should have gone the other direction? Or is this something that you're very satisfied with and would recommend?
Well, my reaction is that I like it more than I thought I would. Like you said, I'll have to wait till I have the Air to see whether it's going to sort itself out sort of by my behavior. Once I have them both, there's going to come a time when I'm going to want to use the iPad as part of my daily routine, and I'm just going to pick up one or the other, and I'm going to wind up picking up the one that I like better overall, and we'll see which one that is. I suspect it'll be the Air, but it might actually be the Mini. But in the meantime, the Mini is far more pleasant to use than I anticipated when I saw them in the store.
Katie?
I'm thrilled. I love everything about this iPad Mini. The only thing that I'm unsure of, and that's just simply a matter of I haven't had enough time with it, is if I were to buy another one next year, or more likely, I'm about on a 2-year upgrade cycle or so, is the LTE, is would I get the LTE version? And that's just something I'm going to have to use over time. I went back and forth with this purchase as to whether or not to get the LTE version. I've always had Wi-Fi iPads, and then with the iPad 3 that I bought last time, I bought the LTE version, and I used it exactly twice. And so I really struggled about whether or not to buy LTE with this iPad now that we've got tethering on our phones. Didn't for a long time, but did in the last year or so get tethering on my phone. And I ultimately went ahead and spent the extra $130, got the LTE on my iPad just because I really wanted to know, am I going to use this thing out of the house? Am I going to use it as much as I hope that I will out and about? And if the answer to that is yes, then the LTE was a good choice, and that's fine. if I find a year, 2 years from now that the answer to that is not really, I think I'll stick with the iPad Mini. But next time I just won't get the LTE, and I'll save myself $130 on the front end and $10 a month on the back end.
Yeah, I've had a similar dilemma, and I have the LTE on my iPad 3, and like Katie says, I've used it maybe twice over the past year, maybe twice. And what happens is I have an iPhone that I carry around with me all the time, and there have been a few occasions when I've had the iPad and I wanted to do something without getting on a Wi-Fi network with the iPad. And I just said, the heck with it, and I pulled out my iPhone and did it on my iPhone instead. And the number of times that there's something that I want to do that in a sort of emergency situation where a Wi-Fi network isn't available and has to be on LTE, and the iPhone isn't good enough, and I really wish that I had LTE on the iPad, is like once every 6 months. So it's hardly worth it. I did get it on the iPad Air just because I've always had it on iPad, and I sort of in a rut, but I decided I didn't need it on the Mini. And next time I might either one.
I will tell you the one decision I'm debating about, and Ted or Chuck, maybe you guys have some insight, is whether or not to buy AppleCare Plus on the Mini. I have always bought it on my phones, and I better knock on some wood here. I have never had an incident with an iOS device that I've had to replace due to damage. I've never dropped one or had a water incident or anything like that. But I have used AppleCare Plus. In fact, I'm using it this week for batteries outside of my normal 1-year warranty. And I'm sure that there will be in the future, especially now that I've said it, probably tomorrow, an incident where I'll have to use my AppleCare Plus for an accident. And I've always got them on the phone just for that peace of mind. I've never gotten them on the iPad, mainly because the iPad I felt less at risk because it was a home device. So I'm really debating on whether or not to spend that extra $99. I think you have within the first 30 days or so to buy it, but you have to take it back to an Apple store to have them check it out and make sure you haven't destroyed it first. So I'm debating about that.
I have pretty strong feelings about it. I've never gotten AppleCare on anything, and I've been accents aside. Let's eliminate the accent situation for the moment. If you get AppleCare on an iPhone, especially on an iPhone, you're covered under the first year anyway, even if you don't get AppleCare. And so really the AppleCare is only helping you for years 2 and 3. And most people, if you're like me...
Only year 2 on the iPhone and the iPad.
Okay,
it's only 2 years on the iPhone and iPad.
It's only 2, and in fact, you're probably going to get a new, even if it was year 3 was my point, you're going to get a new iPhone 2 years anyway. And so really you're paying AppleCare to have that coverage available for 12 months from the end of year 1 to the end of year 2. And for me, it's just not worth it. Everybody can point to an example, I'm sure, of when they saved money because they had it. And other people can point to an example of when they lost money because they had it. And so just an occasional anecdote isn't really going to be good enough. My feeling is, especially again, somebody like me, the number of Apple products I bought over the years is incredible. I bought every iPhone that's ever come out, every iPad that's ever come out, numerous Macs, all sorts of accessories, Apple TVs, Airport Expresses. If I had bought almost never, let's be clear, almost never have I needed a repair on any of those devices that would have been covered by AppleCare. If I had paid for AppleCare on all those devices, I would be so far in the red that I could probably buy a new Mac Pro with the money that I would have spent otherwise. And so if you're pretty careful with how you take care of things, I guess you have to judge yourself. If you think you're kind of accident prone and something's going to happen inevitably to your iPad or iPhone, maybe it's worth it. But if you're like me and take pretty good care of them and rarely have problems, don't just worry about the particular one device, but think in the long term in terms of, is it going to be worth it for me to spend $99, $199, whatever it is for a particular device, year in and year out, every time I get a new device, most of the time when I won't need it? And for me, the answer has been clearly no.
I guess I'm not quite as strong as Ted. I think you have to evaluate what the product is and how you're going to use it. And if it indeed is a home device, then you have to figure out do you have hardwood floors or stone floors or carpeted floors. But Katie, if you're throwing it in your purse and all every day, and you never know when you might reach in there for your keys and pull out your iPad by mistake or have it catch on the iPad and have it crash and burn. One thing that's different in my mind about the iPad versus the iPhone, if you have an iPhone, you're under contract and you're doing that whole thing where, you can't get a subsidized purchase again. With the iPad, there's no subsidy, there's no nothing. The price of the iPad is the price of the iPad. So if something would happen to it, you kind of have an idea of a fixed cost and what it's going to be. That all kind of factors into my calculations, but I did not get it yet on my iPad Air. I still have some time. But it almost depends on what case I end up with. If I end up, Katie, with your case, for the Air version of your case, I probably will. If I end up with something a little heavier duty like the Zugu, I'm not quite as paranoid.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this case that I have, it's gorgeous, but it's not going to offer me any drop protection. It's going to offer me protections from a few little dings and scuffs and bumping into things. But Chuck, the last iPad case I had was the Marwar CEO case, which I loved. Great case, a little bulky, but I would sling my iPad around. I was walking into my bedroom and I tossed it on the bed, and it took one bounce too many, and bounced off the side and bounced off the hardwood floors. And I was like, oh. But it was fine, doing something like this and with an iPad mini in the case that I have it in. Let's just say I'm not going to be tossing it on the bed.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't. I haven't lost an iPad or an iPhone due to accidental damage since the first iPhone came out in 2007. So maybe I'm the anecdote that's lucky, but it certainly hasn't convinced me to change my mind about AppleCare. There is one way, though, that I would say that AppleCare is worth it, and that's from a strictly an insurance perspective, and that is it'd be simple enough for me to say, well, even if you're talking about the subsidized iPhone, even if I wound up having to pay $500 or $600 to replace an iPhone because I couldn't get the subsidized price, I might still say AppleCare wasn't worth it because I could think about all the hundreds of dollars that I would have spent for years past that I didn't spend. That adds up to more than $500 or $600, and so in the long run, I've come out ahead anyway. On the other hand, maybe maybe I'm just the sort of person, my finances are such, I can't afford $600. That if I lost my iPhone and had to spend $600 to get a new one, I wouldn't get an iPhone, or I wouldn't get a new one to replace it, that's for sure. And maybe I can afford $99 for AppleCare, but not $600 to replace an iPhone. And so just to protect against that catastrophic event, so to speak, it's worth the $99. But if you can afford the replacement costs, I think you'll and you're reasonably careful in how you treat your devices, I think you'll almost always come out ahead by not getting AppleCare.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, sound advice. So, guys, I left one category to the end because in some ways it's a big one, in some ways it's a little one. Katie, I believe you said that your configuration is a 32 gig model.
Correct.
Ted?
Yeah, I forget. Not everybody can see me nodding.
Yeah. Ted, what configuration did you get?
64.
Okay. Reasons for your selection?
I got 64 because my iPad 3 had about 50 some odd gigabytes on it, so I was already coming close to filling it up. So I just said, that's the way I use my device. I want 64 again. And I also, it had been slowly filling up towards that amount over the course of a year, or actually more than a year, because I was transferring from my iPad 2 prior to that. And it wasn't coming close to getting to 64. And so there's no way I figured for how I use the iPad that I was going to need 128 gigabytes. So I said, all right, I'll save that $100 and just stick with the 64 I've been happy with. So it was pretty simple.
Okay. Katie, how about you?
I have always had 16 gig iPads, and it, for the most part, has been fine. What I would do to supplement that is I had one of those Kingston Mobile Light Wireless, which is a device that you can either connect an external hard drive, flash drive, or camera card, a micro SD card, or to expand the storage if you wanted to load it up with movies or TV shows or something like that for a special occasion. And that's what I would use if I was traveling. And that's been fine, because I found that by and large a 16 gigabyte model was okay for me, except for those couple of times a year when I was traveling and wanted to really load up and take a lot of media with me on the go. With iOS 7, with Retina, with apps just in general ballooning in size, I started finding that for my everyday use, 16 was getting tight. Some of these great iBooks author books, like my good friend David Sparks has just put out yet another one that's now a gig in size. And I want to be able to carry those types of things around on my iPad. And I want to have those kind of rich media experiences without having to say, all right, am I going to take the email book, or am I going to take the markdown book? Am I going to do this, or am I going to take this movie? Am I going to, what am I going to do going back and forth? So 16 was getting a little tight, and I just said, I'm just going to go ahead and go 32. And I don't see myself even coming close to filling up 32, but I've got it if I need it.
Yeah, I recommend 32 to most of my friends that ask what size they should get. The problem I've always had with 16 and not thinking about using a wireless extension like Katie was talking about is that I consider that the operating system alone takes up 6, 7, maybe even these days 8 gigabytes. I haven't checked recently. And so you're losing close to half of your 16 gigabytes before you add anything to it. And so if you bump it up to 32, you're not really doubling your storage from 16. You're almost tripling or quadrupling it, depending on how you look at it. So from that perspective, I always thought the extra $100 to get 32 gigabytes was worth it. Whether you need 64 or not is a lot more iffy. And I take advantage of it by just keeping more things on it. And I don't have any of those wireless solutions that Katie talked about. So it works out fine for me.
Yeah, and I don't keep music on my iPad. I keep all of my music on my iPhone, so I have a little bit larger iPhone, and I don't keep any photos on my iPad. Because I don't take any photos with my iPad.
Yeah.
As we've said.
You made that abundantly clear, yeah. You think it's stupid, I believe.
I didn't say that. I might have implied that, but I didn't say that.
That's what Chuck inferred, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when Katie stuck her phone up and said, I can't hear you, that sort of gave it away. I lied. One last question. What colors?
Space gray.
I again split the difference. I got space gray for my larger iPad, the iPad Air, and I've always had black for all my prior iPads, and I think you and I talked about this once. I like the idea of a black for a large display, especially. I think the white gets in the way of the large display. It's like for my 60-inch television that I have downstairs in our home theater area, I wouldn't want a white rim around it. I much prefer a black rim around it, and you would be hard-pressed to find a TV that had a white rim around it. So for the same reason, I went with black, and I like the space gray look, and it's a new look, so I thought I'd get it. For the iPad mini, I had a white iPhone, and I liked it, and I thought for something that mini size, the white would be nice. And actually, I really liked it. I can't explain exactly why, but every time I'm sitting in front of the mini and working with it, I'm enjoying seeing the white border around it. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I think I'll be happy with the black for the larger one as well when it comes. So I split the difference once again.
We should play blackjack with you, Ted. Well, guys, thank you. I gather that the iPad mini is an unconditional go for it and buy. Just pick your configuration carefully.
Yeah, I just have to concur with the general nature of the reviews that Apple has hit home runs with these devices. There's no doubt about it. That there are cheaper tablets and iPhones available, but I don't think in terms of the wealth of apps available, the speed of the processor and how that makes it feel on a day-to-day basis, the solidness of the construction, how light it is, how small it is, in terms of the new iPad Air especially, how thin they all are. I just don't think there's a better product on the market, and Apple has really done a great job this year. And to have them both, the iPad Air and the iPad Mini, to be virtually identical, as you said earlier, Chuck, except for the size, that there's no compromise in getting the Mini anymore, which is another spectacular improvement that nobody was predicting. I remember seeing predictions just a few months ago that the second generation iPad Mini wouldn't even be a Retina display because they wouldn't be able to do it cheap enough. So I think Apple really pulled the rabbit out of the hat with this.
I just want to know what Ted's going to do next year when they come out with the iPad Pro.
Yeah, I'm writing an article about that, actually, Katie. Hopefully it'll be out in a month or so. So
Okay.
it's a back burner sort of article. But yeah, that'll be interesting.
All right, so same time, same place next year to talk about the iPad Pro.
And my cat wanted to get into the...
Oh, God. It's okay, that's the first cat that's been on the show.
We're going to the animals,
We're
Chuck.
going with the dogs, or cats, yeah. Well, Katie Floyd, Ted Landau, thank you for serving on this edition of the MacJury on the iPad Mini with Retina. It sounds very positive, and now maybe I'm sorry I didn't get one. Oh, well.
Do what I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Just go get both.
Sure.
No problem.
Sure, no problem. Guys, thanks so much.
Thanks, Chuck.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Folks, check out our show notes. I'll have links to everything that Katie and Ted both do, along with any supplementary material we can find that will help you make a decision on which iPad to get. And whichever one you get, let me know. I'm curious. Chuck@MacVoices.com. Until the next time, the verdict is in. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.